It is Monday, the 5th of March, 2018, and this is the Monday Morning Analyst. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Can't wait for this one. What an important moment, really, in the history of Brian Ortega, an important moment for the UFC. It's sad for Frankie Edgar and all of his fans. I do think he'll be back, though, especially if he decides to drop to bantamweight. But UFC 222 is in the books, and Brian Ortega getting an absolutely historic win over a historic competitor, to be quite honest. This was a bit of a coming-out party for Brian Ortega, really stepping up to the plate, earning that title shot against Max Holloway in very dramatic fashion. Now, if you want a full breakdown of the UFC 222 card, I did that on my post-fight special on my YouTube channel. I'll put that up here. You can check that out. But for now, let's talk about that co-main event. How did Brian Ortega end up beating Frankie Edgar, becoming the first man to defeat him via stoppage, and to do so in only just the first round? This was a guy who we knew had great jiu-jitsu, and this is a guy who we knew had developing striking, but I didn't see anybody say he was going to go there and with his striking blow the doors off of Frankie Edgar, and that's really what he did in the end. Is there a method to his madness? Yes, there is. I think I figured out at least the majority of what it is. Let's take a look at my theories now. So what was Frankie Edgar trying to do in this fight? Well, in some ways, some things he always does. If you go back and you watch, to some extent, the Jeremy Stephens fight, or very little of it, but some on the Yair Rodriguez fight, but more in particular, the second Jose Aldo fight from UFC 200, which, by the way, I did a Monday Morning Analyst on. It's the same kind of thing. He likes to get a lot of movement, a lot of fakes, a lot of feints. He's doing a lot of not stationary, moving around the octagon, plus trunk movement as well. Feet are always in motion. And what he tries to do is he tries to fade one way, then he wants to fade to his left so he can create a lane for his right hand down the pike. That's exactly what he's looking for. He does that a lot here, although a little bit different too. He adds more than just that weapon. But that's a big component, right? When you watch this fight and you go back and you look at it, you can see shades of that, a lot of the same game plan, right? You can't completely get away from who you are, and that's been a largely successful strategy for him, although not so much in this contest and definitely not in that Jose Aldo fight. But getting on his feet, moving his trunk, I think we'd all agree, managing his distance for the most part, we can all agree that those are pretty good things to try and bring to any fight, and he does a lot of that successfully here. A couple of other things he does as well. I want to show you two more clips from different portions of the fight. Obviously, it was only one round, but different portions nonetheless. One goes really well for him. The other one is just no big deal in one respect. So let's look at them right here. I'm going to just put them in succession. The first one around the 4:20 mark of the fight. What you can see is this was another strategy of his. He was trying to flurry to the point where you had to cover up and move backwards at the same time. Now, you don't have to move backwards in a straight line, but here's my point. You're going to see in just a second that Edgar really gets in trouble when he tries a certain kind of combination and he doesn't draw out any kind of reaction first. What he really wants you to do is he likes to be in motion. He likes to use some kind of fakes and feints. Sometimes it's the jab, sometimes it's the triple jab, sometimes it's a lot of different things. Here's another one where he's trying a flurry. He gets you to back up, and then he's trying to draw a reaction out of you. In this particular case, for the first one, it's Brian Ortega throwing a left hook, and it misses because you know Edgar is anticipating it, and plus he wants to draw out that punch so then he can land something over the top. He actually wanted to get a shot over the top with the right hand. He actually lands it a couple of times, not necessarily exactly in this circumstance. But what he really wants to do is he wants to fake, he wants to feint, he wants you to draw a reaction out of you and then attack you after the fact. And or, depending on exactly what's happening here, he wants to throw a flurry to get you to block, then he wants to back you up. So now you can't plant your feet, you can't sort of make a quick reaction, you're getting backed out of space, you have to worry about all of that, plus you're covering up, and then you throw a reaction shot, and he wants to counter on top of that. This is a great example of that, and this is something that, of course, was part of the fight, especially very early on. Things were going well for Frankie Edgar, but of course, this isn't the full story. There's a second one here where he tries, where you can begin to see, well, the beginning of the end for him. I want you to pay attention here very closely. What do you notice is the key difference here? Number one, he likes not just working behind the jab, but he likes this fake left, fake right, then come over the top with a left hook combo. But it's the second part of what you're looking at here that really, to me, is the whole story of the fight and why it didn't necessarily go all that well for him. When Frankie Edgar's way on the outside and he's jabbing his way in, right? So he's really minding distance. He's really far away, and then he has to find a way inside. He's going right to left, left to right, right. He's moving side to side. He's moving in and out. He's faking. He's feinting. He didn't attempt a whole lot of takedowns in this contest, which I also think was a big part of it, but neither here nor there. But when he's really far outside, he has to find his way inside. It didn't go so well for him against in the Jose Aldo fights, but it has typically gone really well for him for the most part, right? He likes to get in and get out, and in the meantime, he likes to get a shot in or a couple shots in. He likes to get you backing up. He likes to get you covering up, so you can't really plant your feet. You can't really counter him. He's trying to draw something out of you so that he can counter you, right? He just tries to put the fight on his terms. But you notice in the second part of this combo, or the second part of this frame anyway, this little clip, I should say, it doesn't really go that well for him. And this is, to me, almost identical to what happens in the very end, which we'll look at in just a second. But look at this here. He fakes one to the other and then tries to come in with another shot over the top on the left and nearly gets countered. What is the difference here? You'll notice he's not starting way outside and then finding a way inside. He's not drawing a reaction so much out of Brian Ortega, although he does a little bit. But you'll notice they're planted in space and he's in punching range. So rather than being side to side, in and out, faking, feinting, doing all that, he actually comes to a bit of a stop and then tries to start working his combos. Well, it doesn't go that well for him. You can see Brian Ortega reads it. Now, Frankie Edgar has enough sense to get out after the uppercut is thrown and to not over-pursue, so good on him. But you can see that this was not something that was going to go well for him had he really committed to it. And you can also see Brian Ortega read it a mile away. Here's a big key to take away from this fight. Brian Ortega's ability to read in real time what opposition were doing, especially in this case Frankie Edgar, is pretty tremendous. He has made a dramatic improvement in that regard. Still a long way to go, don't misunderstand me, but wow, he is much more naturally seeing the field and able to make a quick read on it, to borrow from the quarterback analogy here as well. This is, to me, almost identical to what you're going to see at the very end. And you can just tell this was a little bit of the beginning of the end. By the way, if you go back to the very beginning of the round, something kind of similar, but almost within 30, actually I think within 30 seconds exactly, a little bit under that, maybe even like 20 seconds and some change, you see Brian Ortega get ready for that left-hand elbow. Now he's not able to land it because he's not really able to set up, and because Frankie Edgar was so far away. But here's the big takeaway. When Frankie Edgar was really far away and jabbing inside, maybe he had success, maybe he didn't, right? Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. If he could get a flurry going and get you to block, maybe he could land a shot over the top. If he could draw a right out of you and then he can counter with his own right over the top, maybe he had success. But for the most part, he wasn't really being countered. He wasn't really being affected. When he kind of stopped in the in-between and then initiated, it was a lot easier to read for Brian Ortega. I want to bring that up a little bit later. Plus, let's look at something Brian Ortega did in this contest that I did not notice in real time that I caught after the fact. I find very interesting. Brian Ortega did something highly interesting in this contest. He used a left-hand post. He used a left-hand frame the entire time. Well, not the entire time, but many instances in this contest. And this is a highlight of every time he did that. Now, what does that have to do with the end? Well, not altogether connected, but some of it really kind of is. Why would he want to use that lead hand post? For a couple of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned before, Frankie Edgar, when he had success, would be way outside and he would find a way inside. This is a way, if you can get one hand up and you can get one hand over, you can keep his Frankie Edgar from really sort of collapsing the space and doing what he wants to. Remember, if he's throwing a flurry, he needs to get inside that distance and really go to the body, then get upstairs. He has to get you guessing and checking. If you have a frame up, you can block and you can look and then you can circle out based on what's happening. So you limit his ability to collapse the pocket. You're able to keep your eyes open. You're limiting the damage. It allows you to get you backwards at the same time because now you can move in conjunction with him, and it just allows you to keep your eyes on your opponent, right? Very effective, especially if you have the right reach. This was a smart strategy by him, understanding his leverages, understanding his opponents, and connecting that to his strategy. Very smart game planning. One big takeaway from me from this contest was how much Brian Ortega knew about Frankie Edgar, how well he anticipated what was going to happen here. So that's one reason why he would do it. Another reason is, and you can see this at the very end, it enabled him to understand the spatial relationship between him and Frankie. If I have him on the post, not only can I prevent him from making further contact with me, further getting inside my range, but I can cock my right hand ready. You can see a lot of times the uppercut missed. Now, he did land it in a very dramatic way, lifting Edgar off of his feet at the end of the fight, but it's the same kind of thing he'd been setting up the entire time, right? Putting you at a distance. It's the same thing BJJ Scout was talking about, not identical to what Conor McGregor was doing. Conor McGregor will often let you just come right on top of the forearm as opposed to the end of the hand. But the point being is these guys are beginning to use frames to slow people down, help them understand the spatial relationship between them. He does this over and over in this fight, sometimes switching left hand to right, right hand to left, but nevertheless, it's the same thing. Whether it's this hand up and this hand out or this hand up and this hand out, he's still doing the exact same thing. I thought this was a really, really interesting choice by him. Again, it's understanding my leverages versus yours, and then marrying that to an understanding of what I know you need to do, and then taking that away from you. Now, let's put all of that together. What does that tell us? Well, we know Edgar had some success. If he didn't land a ton, he was able to have some success with what? Number one, being way outside, getting on the inside, either drawing a reaction out of Ortega and then landing over the top, or backing him up with a flurry, getting him to block, getting his feet to move backwards, and then either drawing a reaction out of him or just in the course of him covering up, land and find some kind of opening in the spot there. Those are really the two ways he was able to have some success. When he didn't do those things, he had a problem. If you look at the ending sequence here, what do you notice? Number one, we went back to 4:38 of the first round. You know you see Ortega try to land that elbow very early in the fight. They knew he was going to be there. How did they know he was going to be there? Well, they knew he was going to be bringing in forward pressure. That was one. But the other part is it's hard to catch Edgar, especially if you're backing up and blocking the whole time, with a left hook, a lead left hook. It's hard to find an opening for that check hook, because he gets inside of it so far. That's one reason why why Ortega wanted to have that hand up. If he has that hand up, yes, he can't throw the punch with it, but maybe he can put an elbow on top of it after the fact. That's another thing he can sort of do here. But if you're just trying to time Edgar in space, he's waiting for that left hook, and he gets under it, he gets to the outside of it, he does a lot of things. It can't really work all that well. But once he slows down in space and then tries that left-right-left combo that he goes to, he's a lot more readable. And I think that's why he gets clipped here with this overhand left, and of course later on the uppercut with the other frame you guys know the story about. But this is the big one to me. When he could draw a reaction out of Brian Ortega, he actually was able to land the right. If he could draw a jab, let's say, out of Brian Ortega, he was actually able to land the right. But if he couldn't draw a reaction and he wasn't coming far outside and really using a lot of movement, but kind of just stationary in motion, and then tried inside punching range, they knew, don't throw the left hook because you're probably going to miss. Get him when he's super in tight and throw that elbow over the top. And that's exactly what he did. I'm very impressed by the shot selection by Brian Ortega. I'm very impressed by how quickly he's able to make reads and taking advantage of Frankie Edgar's mistakes. Like I mentioned, Frankie Edgar, maybe he doesn't land, maybe he does when he comes way, way outside, but he mostly stays out of trouble. When he got caught in that in-between space where he wasn't really in the right place and then initiated a very readable combo, that's when things went real south for him. It was a very, very interesting moment for me in Brian Ortega's development. We talk about what it looks like when someone makes these incremental leaps. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at it. You're looking at it. To me, it's not just that he finished Frankie Edgar. Of course, that's beyond impressive in its own right because no one else had to this point. But it's showing, he was numerically outstruck in virtually every one of his other UFC fights. And he was on his way to being, I think, numerically outstruck in this one. I don't know what the final tally was because the ending, it was just sort of Frankie Edgar covering up. But up until that point, Frankie Edgar was just doing a lot of the offense. And to me, the ability to create a set of weapons that could be tailored for your opponent's game plan, and then have the presence of mind to bring them to bear, and then to make reads later in the fight where you're not biting on his fakes, to recognize spatially when someone is not doing all the things that they're supposed to because they're just sort of sitting in that middle space, and then making a quick read like that. Very, very impressive by Brian Ortega. I have to say, this one really caught me by surprise. I thought for sure he'd lose the first two rounds, and then we'll see in the third round, because he's so special with his submissions. And to me, this is a quantum leap in his ability to strike. And last but not least, we take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead, and the answer is nothing. There is nothing coming up. Well, I mean, if there's always MMA across the world, but there's nothing of any major significance. No Bellator, no UFC, not even Invicta. KSW was this past weekend. So there might be some smaller shows out there in the world. There might be some great MMA. I'm not saying there won't be, but nothing too major. So what would you like to see for next week's Monday Morning Analyst? Let me know. Shoot me an email, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. All right, so what did I get wrong? What did I get right? What do you have to say, as I mentioned? Give me an email either for what you want to see next week or what you saw this week. It's all fair game. I appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, enjoy the fights.